In 1984, a British businessman named David Grant was thrown into prison for a brand new crime. He was sentenced to 18 months, and he served 6 of them. And after it was all over, his business was sold off because of court costs and bad publicity. Guess what that shocking new crime was? He and his business partners were found guilty of possessing 200 videotapes. That's it. You're probably thinking, what was on those tapes? Was it evidence of a murder? Footage of a secret government meeting? What kind of horrible secrets did those tapes hold? Well, here's the secret. It was just a movie, a horror movie called Nightmares in a Damaged Brain, and UK law said it was illegal. But here's where it gets crazy. It wasn't even the whole movie that was illegal. It was just 48 seconds of the movie that put David Grant in prison. How does something like that happen? Well, it all starts with the birth of home video in a movie called The Driller Killer. In the modern era, we're able to search, access, and watch almost any movie we want on our phone, our tablet, our TV, anywhere. But for over 80 years, until the 1970s, you could only see movies in 2 places, projected in a theater or played on one of the few TV channels that were available. That meant your choices were limited and someone had a lot of control over what was shown. Everything changed when video became available to the public in the 1970s. Now, thanks to VHS tapes, you could bring movies into your home and watch them whenever you wanted. For the first time, viewers had control over what and when they watched something. That was mostly not a problem for the UK, except for one big issue: the British Board of Film Censors. They were in charge of rating movies in the UK and deciding what could and could not be shown in theaters. But since video was new, there were no rules about what could be shown on a videotape. That's when filmmakers decided to cash in on that loophole. The distributors of films publicized their movies as too shocking to play in theaters. Movies like The Driller Killer, about a man who goes on a rampage of murder with a power drill, and Cannibal Holocaust, about a crew of documentary filmmakers captured and eaten in the Amazon. The Driller Killer took out full-page ads in magazines showing the movie's cover, and that got folks clutching their pearls and calling to speak to a manager. Eventually, these kinds of movies came to the attention of the National Viewers and Listeners Association, a real organization with a terrible name and an unfortunate amount of influence with the public at the time. These kinds of movies were nicknamed video nasties, and they were blamed for everything from violent crime to the corruption of minors who were seeking out these films. What the distributors thought would be a great publicity stunt backfired big time. They were now the new social scapegoat. In less than 2 years from the Driller Killer's release, the UK government would pass a law called the Video Recordings Act of 1984. This gave the BBFC the power to control what was seen in theaters and on home video. Every movie had to submit to them and be judged, including movies that had already been released. Suddenly, movies that were already out on video store shelves were being confiscated, censored, and outright banned. Many of the titles were allowed to be released with new edits that removed the material that was considered offensive, but some titles were simply never released again. And it wasn't just obscure, gory exploitation films that were affected. The Exorcist was pulled from shelves in 1986, and it wouldn't be legally available in its original version again until 1999. The craziest part of the Video Recordings Act is what put David Grant in prison. The law not only said that the BBFC needed to screen all movies for content, but that releasing an unclassified title was now a criminal offense. Every distributor who sold a horror movie that was uncut or never screened for the BBFC was risking their freedom and their finances. Ultimately, there were 72 movies that were targeted as video nasties, which had their copies seized by authorities whenever they were discovered. But only Nightmares in a Damaged Brain was ever actually prosecuted for obscenity charges. This is the wildest part. There was already an edited version of Nightmares in a Damaged Brain, which had approval to release in theaters in the UK, but that version was about a minute shorter, and that wasn't the version that was on those 200 tapes that David Grant's company had on hand. You might be thinking, why didn't the company just sell the edited version? And the answer is complicated. First of all, they were exploitation filmmakers, and they made their money by selling the shocking elements of a movie. They'd been doing it for decades at that point, but just as importantly, they were also fighting what they believed to be censorship. The government was telling them what was allowed to be in a film, not what was appropriate for a certain age group, but what was legal to show at all. It wasn't just dangerous for the future of the business they owned, but for the medium of filmmaking overall. So they fought, and in the end, David Grant and his partners lost the court battle. Because of the costs of the court case and because of David's jail time, their film distribution company, World of Video 2000, was put into liquidation. David Grant's career in film distribution and filmmaking never recovered. He had directed or produced dozens of movies and distributed over 50 of them, but he never worked again. He died in 1991 while the Video Recordings Act was still in full effect and causing hundreds of movies to be cut for content and dozens of films to never reach UK audiences. While David Grant's story doesn't have a happy ending, the world of UK film censorship has a slightly happier one. In the year 2000, the leadership of the BBFC changed, and they welcomed public input into its standards. The rules changed for films intended for audience members over the age of 18, and many of the films that had been banned for almost 2 decades were finally able to be seen legally by UK audiences. And that included Nightmares of a Damaged Mind, David Grant's final release. In 2001, an edited version was put out, and there have been several special releases of the film since. The era of the video nasties is not a proud time in the history of entertainment censorship in the UK. It was similar to the American Hays Code in its need to control the politics and morality portrayed in works of art, something that never stands the test of time. In the end, rules and laws like this are removed or revoked, and the memory becomes a cautionary tale. David Grant was a hero to some and a monster to others, but his place in the legal history of movies is important. So the next time you hit play on an unrated version of a movie in your home without any fear of being arrested, take a moment to remember and appreciate David Grant and the many other filmmakers who fought for your legal right to do that safely. Thanks for watching Hammer's Law, and be sure to subscribe for more fun and informative legal stories.